At our engagement party, my boyfriend knelt down on one knee, holding a bouquet and a sparkling diamond ring, and proclaimed his love for me. "Ava, will you marry me?" The words had barely left his mouth before the room fell silent, stunned. My boyfriend froze, his face filled with horror. He'd said the wrong name. From nearby, I caught the sound of his actual lover's laughter. Calmly, I grabbed her arm and led her to the center of the stage. "So she's the one you meant to propose to? Go ahead! The two of you are so well matched, I'm actually starting to enjoy the show." Chapter 1. Early last month, we celebrated my grandfather's 80th birthday. 2 months in advance, I told Caleb that he had to attend, no matter what. But he still didn't show up. The reason? Zoe's pet hamster had come down with a case of diarrhea. He spent the whole night caring for it and ended up missing the birthday celebration. I was furious and yelled at him. But he just frowned, giving me a cold look, clearly annoyed at how immature I was being. "Olivia, can't you be more mature? It's just a birthday celebration. That hamster is Zoe's precious baby. It got sick, how could I ignore it?" Because of this, we barely spoke for a month. This morning, Caleb had a florist deliver a bouquet to me. Attached to it was a card that read, "Happy birthday. See you at the Western restaurant tonight." My colleagues looked on with envy. I calmly picked up the card and handed the flowers to a colleague who was watching. I'm allergic to pollen, and after all these years, Caleb still hadn't remembered. But I softened, knowing he was at least trying to make amends. After all, we've been together so long that he knows me better than anyone. Every time we fought or went through a cold silence, as long as he made even the smallest effort, I'd forgive him. He thought I was just easy to appease. In reality, I kept forgiving him because I cared too much about this relationship. We've been together for 8 years, he's become a part of me. He knew I couldn't leave him, so he did these hurtful things without a second thought. It's my own fault for not being stronger, for loving so humbly. But looking at this bouquet and the card, I felt nothing. In the past, I would have been thrilled. Because he never remembered my birthday or our anniversaries. Every year, I had to remind him over and over. This time, he remembered on his own and even made a dinner reservation. I thought I'd be happy. But in reality, I felt nothing. I was even a little annoyed. I wondered what excuse Zoe would use to lure him away tonight. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. As expected, Caleb hadn't arrived. He's always late for dates, I'm used to it. An hour went by. I glanced at the time, he was already 45 minutes late. But he still hadn't broken his record of being 5 hours late. Another 2 hours passed. A waiter, looking a bit awkward, informed me they were about to close. I smiled and ordered the most expensive steak on the menu. With soft violin music in the background, I calmly finished my meal. I left just before the restaurant closed. Standing by the curb, waiting for a cab, I couldn't resist checking my social media. Caleb had posted a photo. Zoe, holding a puppy with a little birthday hat on its head. The caption read, "Milo is 1 year old." Looking at this photo, I felt neither anger nor resentment. I just found myself admiring Zoe. But it wasn't entirely her fault. It takes 2 people to let this happen. Caleb had to be willing to indulge her. Without a second thought, I gave the post a like. Then I got in a cab and went home. This was the umpteenth time Caleb had stood me up. I'd lost count. When forced to choose, he would always pick Zoe without hesitation. In the past, I'd broken down, gone mad, and raged over it. But this time, why didn't I feel sad at all? Chapter 2. When I arrived home and unlocked the door, darkness greeted me. It was clear, Caleb hadn't come back yet. Standing in the empty entryway, an inexplicable sense of calm washed over me. Late that night, the sound of the fingerprint lock woke me from a light sleep. I've never been a deep sleeper. In the past, whenever Caleb returned late, I would drag myself out of bed, bleary-eyed, to greet him. I'd take his files and coat, then ask, "Are you hungry? Do you want something warm?" But ever since Zoe reappeared, the routine had changed. I started noticing a strong perfume lingering on his clothes. Back then, I felt a wild urge to confront him, the words spilling out in anger, accusations boiling over. He'd either respond with a cold silence or come home even later, leaving me waiting, searching his face for a hint of the truth. Many nights ended with me crying, feeling raw, only to face the empty silence when he ignored my pain. I endured it quietly, pretending it was all just a misunderstanding, that things were normal. Day by day, I told myself it would pass, that things would go back to the way they were. Looking back now, I can hardly recognize that person, that version of me. But things are clearer now. I know what I need to do, and I'm ready to let go. The woman who wept and lashed out when Caleb came home late, she must have seemed pathetic to him. Thank goodness those days are behind me. I drew a deep breath and let myself sink back into sleep, a calm I hadn't felt in ages slowly settling over me. In a half-dream, I faintly heard Caleb call my name. Olivia? But the voice drifted off, distant, and sleep took me again. It was the first peaceful rest I'd had in so long, as though a weight had finally lifted. The next morning, I skipped my usual routine, grabbing a cold iced coffee from the fridge and heading straight to work. No more early mornings spent in the kitchen, making breakfast he'd barely glance at. All day, I immersed myself in work, letting the hours blur together without a single glance at my phone. It wasn't until evening, when I finally checked my messages, that I confirmed what I'd already known: no texts from Caleb. On my way home, I stopped at the bustling food street and bought fried chicken and spicy noodles. I didn't expect to see him already home when I walked in. Seated on the sofa, Caleb glanced up as I entered, his gaze narrowing at the takeout bag in my hand. "Is that all you're having for dinner?" he asked, a hint of disapproval in his tone. "That stuff is terrible for you." I shrugged, setting down the bag. "As long as it tastes good." He seemed taken aback when he realized I hadn't thought to get him anything. The look in his eyes shifted, as though he was trying to gauge my mood. Finally, he spoke, his tone measured. "About last night, something came up. It's not what you're thinking." I opened my takeout, spreading out the noodles and fried chicken on the coffee table, barely sparing him a glance. "It's fine. I don't care." He paused, his eyes flicking between me and the food. I could see the confusion and perhaps irritation on his face, but I kept my focus on my meal. Undeterred, he walked over and, with a press of his finger, paused the TV. "Olivia, can you stop ignoring me for a minute?" His voice was firmer now, an edge of frustration breaking through. I looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time all evening. "What is it, Caleb?" He seemed momentarily surprised, but the expression quickly shifted to one of mockery. "I've already explained myself. Why are you still clinging to this?" Seriously, I had already said it was fine. Who was really the one refusing to let go? "I believe your explanation. I understand. Now, can I continue with my dinner?" For a moment, he was at a loss for words, his face clouded with frustration. "And my dinner?" he asked, his tone self-righteous. I looked up at him once more. "If you think takeout is unhealthy, go ahead and order yourself something that meets your standards." There was no way I'd worry about him like I used to, cooking and doing household chores for him. "Olivia!" Caleb slammed his hand on the table and shouted, though he quickly seemed to realize his tone was off. He made an effort to calm down and continued. "You know that Zoe just returned from abroad. Losing her parents hit her hard. It's really challenging for her to live here on her own. I just want to look out for her a bit. So you're actually making a fuss just because I celebrated her birthday? Are you worried you won't make it to your next one?" Hearing his words, I paused, my chopsticks suspended in mid-air. Such cruel words. Fortunately, I no longer had feelings for him, or they would have stung deeply. "I get it. I understand." My words seemed to deflate him, leaving his anger with nowhere to go. In frustration, he turned to the vase nearby. With a loud crash, he shattered it against the cabinet, and with another harsh bang, he stormed out the door. Watching the scattered shards on the floor, I called after him with a calm tone. Clean up your own mess. Chapter 3. As expected, Caleb and I entered yet another silent period. In the past, I would have felt as if I were walking on pins and needles, my mood sinking lower with each day. But now, I felt strangely at ease. At first, when he was angry, he didn't come home at night. Alone, I quickly fell back into the rhythm of my old routines, coming home after work, watching dramas, indulging in late-night snacks. There was no need to worry about him staying out late with Zoe. Eventually, Caleb returned home, though he still avoided speaking to me. In his silent protest, he even moved to the guest room. This arrangement suited me just fine. I no longer had to share a bed with him, nor did I need to wash his clothes or pick out his suits. I could finally spend my mornings dressing up for myself instead of rushing to make him breakfast. Colleagues began to notice my transformation. They'd comment on how refreshed I looked and even teased me about wedding plans, but I knew the real reason. I'd finally let go. Now, after work, there was no hurry to rush home and prepare dinner. I had extra time to catch up with friends, shop, or simply unwind. My friends even applauded me for finally putting myself first. Caleb and I had been together for 8 years. Back then, I believed that being devoted to him was my sole purpose. All I wanted was to make our home a warm and welcoming place, so much so that I neglected my own needs. I was even ready to quit my job if he wanted me to, content to stay home and focus on being the ideal partner. But looking back, I realized that I'd made a mistake. No one should anchor their entire future on someone else. People change after all. Love, in the end, only relies on sincerity between two people. And some people just lack that sincerity. I channeled the passion I once had for Caleb into my work. My boss noticed my dedication and assigned me a critical project. I poured myself into it, letting everything else fade to the background. After an early morning meeting, I took a rare moment to relax, scrolling through social media. That's when I saw a picture Caleb had posted of some food, with a delicate wrist in the frame, unmistakably Zoe's. She was wearing an expensive couple's watch, the same brand I'd recently seen on Caleb's wrist. In the past, I would have been outraged, but today, I simply tapped the like button. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Caleb, calling for the first time in months. "What do you need?" I asked, hearing Zoe's laughter in the background. Was he calling to rub it in? Just as I was about to hang up, he spoke. "I'll pick you up after work tonight." After over 4 years together, he'd never once offered, not even during storms. Yet now, he wanted to pick me up? Suspicious as I was, I figured I might as well accept the ride. "Sure, I finish at 6. With that, I hung up and returned to my meeting. Making a living and focusing on myself was far more important than indulging Caleb's whims. After work, I finished my summary and walked out of the building, remembering what Caleb had said. Later, as I left the building, I almost forgot his offer. Seeing his car parked nearby, I quickened my steps, only to find Zoe sitting beside him in the passenger seat. Chapter 4. I saw Zoe sitting in the front passenger seat. I smiled, closed the car door, and settled into the back. Once I was comfortable, I noticed that Caleb was looking at me through the rearview mirror. When he saw I wasn't angry, his expression seemed to shift toward mild annoyance. Zoe, sitting in the front, broke the silence. "Olivia, I like sitting here. You don't mind, do you?" After a whole day of meetings, my head felt like it might explode. I didn't have the energy for any more conversation. All I wanted was a bit of peace. "I don't mind," I said. Then I closed my eyes, plugged in my headphones, and began listening to music. Zoe, apparently dissatisfied with my curt reply, noticed that I was no longer paying attention. Seeing that I had tuned out, she turned to chat with Caleb instead. "Cal, Disney is having an anniversary celebration. When should we go? As long as you're happy, we can go anytime." Caleb responded gently. "Then I'll go ahead and buy the tickets. We can go tomorrow." "Oh, but there are only 2-person tickets available. Looks like Olivia can't join us." Zoe made sure to raise her voice, so I couldn't miss her words. I furrowed my brow, mostly irritated because she had interrupted my quiet time. "We can go just the two of us," Caleb said, affectionately pinching her cheek before turning to look at me. He probably thought that flaunting their closeness would annoy me, but he was mistaken. I wasn't bothered at all. If something I no longer wanted had become someone else's treasure, why should I feel upset? Seeing that I didn't react, Caleb leaned in closer to Zoe, the distance between them so small that it seemed they might kiss. A shy smile appeared on Zoe's face. Caleb glanced at me and, seeing no response, irritably fastened her seatbelt. I could sense his mood darkening, and his voice grew heavier. After a brief exchange, Zoe finally stopped talking when she noticed Caleb's impatience. This rare silence allowed me to quickly drift off to sleep. When I woke again, the car had already stopped in the community. Zoe had gotten out of the passenger seat. Caleb lit a cigarette, and the acrid smell immediately woke me up. He knew I had laryngitis and always used to avoid smoking around me for my health. Back when we first started dating, he was considerate and never smoked in front of me. I don't know when that had changed. I thought about the past. We used to argue about this a lot. Once, in the heat of an argument, he'd said, "Zoe is so considerate, she doesn't complain about anything. But you being with you, I can't even breathe." That one sentence felt like the sky had fallen on me. Did he really think I was that unreasonable? The air in the car felt thick with smoke, and I could hardly breathe. I opened the car door and got out. "Olivia!" Caleb called after me, his hand shaking slightly as he flicked the cigarette away. I looked at him, then glanced at the grass and said, "Put it out. Don't start a fire." I turned and walked toward the building. After a long day of meetings, all I wanted was to rest. Behind me, I heard Caleb slam the car door shut. The next day after work, I saw Caleb's car parked downstairs at the office. I went straight to the back seat and opened the door. I expected to see Zoe, but she wasn't there. When Caleb saw me get into the back seat, his brows furrowed as though I had done something wrong. "Yesterday, I just happened to run into Zoe," he said, as if explaining himself. "Oh, it doesn't matter," I muttered, lowering my head to attend to some work. Caleb seemed a little dissatisfied with my response. Seeing me focused on the paperwork, he sighed but didn't speak. I noticed the car wasn't headed home. Curious, I asked, "Aren't we going home?" He sounded a little frustrated and said, "I told you earlier, we're going to a party." "Ah. Is that so? Sorry, I've been busy," I replied. Caleb, Zoe, and I had all been classmates in college. They had grown up in the same school and started dating in high school. It wasn't until Zoe went abroad to study during her first year of university that they broke up. In our third year, Caleb and I became a couple. Everyone knew about the history between the three of us. If this had been a few months ago, I would have refused to attend any reunion that involved Zoe. At these reunions, she would always talk about her past love with Caleb. To her, even the most mundane moments seemed like some fairy tale. Listening to her made my blood boil. But Caleb would always say I was being petty. Eventually, I stopped attending these gatherings. Now, however, my perspective had shifted. Attending once in a while was important for maintaining connections. When we arrived at the KTV private room, Caleb was about to open the door when someone inside suddenly rushed out and into his arms. "Cal, they kept forcing me to drink. You have to help me." Chapter 5. Caleb froze for a second, as if realizing I was still standing next to him. With a stern look, he pushed Zoe away. He turned to explain something to me, but I didn't listen. Instead, I walked past them into the private room. I greeted my old classmates with a cheerful smile. One of the boys who had once pursued me in college saw me enter and raised a glass, asking to drink with me. I politely agreed and was about to take the glass when a pair of long hands suddenly grabbed it. "I'll drink on Olivia's behalf," Caleb said, his tone cold and full of irritation. A few confused classmates leaned over and jokingly said, Caleb, you're only the one drinking on Zoe's behalf, right? Caleb instantly blushed with embarrassment. He quickly looked at me, as if worried I might be upset. To his disappointment, I wasn't bothered. I grabbed a new glass from the table and clinked glasses with some other classmates, chatting with them. Throughout the evening, I got lost in nostalgia, singing college songs with my roommates, and barely spared a glance at Caleb. Seeing me intentionally distance myself, Caleb seemed uncomfortable and tried to stay close to me. Zoe, seeing him ignore her, kept trying to get closer to him. Caleb, who had never pushed her away before, now distanced himself and kept glancing at me. But I was happily singing college songs with my roommates, not sparing him a glance. Soon, Zoe realized something was off, and she edged closer to him. I overheard him telling Zoe quietly, "Move over, don't sit so close." After saying that, he looked at me again, but my eyes never lingered on him. Frustrated, he drank heavily. But then one of our classmates interrupted. "Olivia is still single, right? Haven't you and Caleb gotten married yet? Caleb, you'd better treasure her. Olivia is amazing. If you don't make a move soon, someone else will." I had been focusing on myself the whole night. I'd worked hard to improve my looks and felt confident. Though I was 30, I looked as fresh as I did when I graduated, even more graceful. Hearing those words, Caleb grew anxious. He grabbed my hand tightly, as if trying to claim me. "Caleb, have you ever proposed to Olivia?" We'd been together for so long, yet marriage was never brought up. I had mentioned it once, but he always brushed it off, saying his career was too unstable and he wasn't ready. Caleb didn't answer right away. Some classmates urged me to pressure him into proposing. I wasn't interested in being the center of attention, nor did I think Caleb would actually do it. Just as I was about to stop the whole spectacle, unexpectedly, Caleb suddenly stood up, knelt down on one knee, and said seriously, "Zoe, marry me?" Everyone in the room fell silent. Caleb immediately realized his mistake and scrambled to explain. I was nervous, I meant, it's..." He was so flustered that he couldn't even say my name. Seeing Zoe's smug expression, I grabbed her and placed her in front of Caleb. "You were calling for her, weren't you?" I stepped back, making sure all eyes were on Caleb and Zoe. The room went silent, no one dared to speak. Noticing the awkwardness on everyone's faces, I started clapping, leading the chant. "Say yes! Say yes! Say yes!" Chapter 6. The atmosphere in the room was unbearably tense. One by one, classmates found excuses to leave. I grabbed my bag and left too, leaving Caleb and Zoe behind. As I was about to call a cab, Caleb called. He said he had been drinking and hired a driver, asking me to wait and go home together. I agreed without much thought. After all, it saved me the cab fare. I stood by the roadside for a while, then saw the driver arrive with Caleb's car. Suddenly, someone pushed me aside and opened the car door first. It was Zoe. She opened the back door, trying to sit next to Caleb. I didn't mind and moved to the front passenger seat. "Get out," Caleb said sternly. Zoe tried to act pitiful. The next second, Caleb kicked her out of the car. I glanced at Zoe. She was glaring at me. I gave her a calm smile and got into the front seat. Back home, Caleb seemed to want to explain something. I took out a pile of documents, said I needed to work late, and went to the study. It wasn't that I was avoiding anything. I had an important meeting the next day and needed to prepare. The next morning, as I was leaving for work, Caleb followed, saying he wanted to drive me. "No need, I'm going with a colleague." Seeing my refusal and the documents in my hand, he offered to help carry them. I didn't refuse. The documents were heavy. My colleague's car was already at the gate. Seeing it was a male colleague, Caleb frowned. "Why is it a male colleague?" I rolled my eyes. Having a ride was good enough, why nitpick? "No, you can't ride with him. I'll take you." Caleb tried to pull me away. I shook off his hand, took the documents, and got in the car. Seriously? What's with the morning tantrum? At the office, I put my phone on silent and went into the meeting room. The meeting lasted until noon. When I checked my phone, there were many messages and missed calls from Caleb. The receptionist smiled. Your boyfriend couldn't reach you and called the office. You two have been together so long, still so in love. I smiled back. I remembered reading online that if someone really wanted to find you, they'd try every way. Those who said they couldn't reach you simply didn't care. In the past, I would have been moved to tears by so many messages from Caleb. But now, I was just hungry and wanted lunch, not interested in him. After lunch, I replied with one word. Meeting. He immediately sent several detailed messages about his morning. Annoyed, I set his messages to do not disturb. It felt like our roles had reversed. I used to have endless things to tell him. Now, even replying to his messages felt exhausting. They say when you lose the desire to share, it's a sign of drifting apart. Near the end of the workday, colleagues invited me to a bar. I used to rush home to cook for him and never joined such gatherings. This time, I agreed immediately. A close colleague joked. Haha, our family model finally joins us single folks. I laughed and joined in the fun. Around midnight, I returned home slightly tipsy. As I entered, I saw a figure blocking the way. Looking up, I saw a worried Caleb. Why didn't you answer my calls? Did you drink? Chapter 7. After drinking, all I wanted was to lie down and sleep. But Caleb stood in the doorway, blocking my way. Annoyed, I pushed him aside. Where did you go drinking? He asked. The alcohol made my head spin, the world seemed to sway. Caleb kept nagging, making me furious. I slapped him hard. You hit me? Clearly, Caleb didn't expect me to hit him. Despite our fierce arguments over the years, I never laid a finger on him. I didn't want to hurt someone I loved. But now, all I wanted was to sleep. So what if I did? Got a problem? I snapped, slapping him again. Caleb stood there, stunned. Taking advantage of his shock, I pushed past him and staggered to the study. Even half drunk, I chose not to sleep where he was. The next morning, my head throbbed. Struggling to sit up, I saw a glass of warm water beside me. You should drink less, he said, concerned. Taking the hangover medicine and water, I noticed his slightly swollen cheek, remembering my actions last night. I thought he'd be angry, but Caleb didn't mention it. Since he didn't care, I didn't dwell on it. Last night's slaps were a small price for all the heartbreak he caused. From then on, Caleb changed completely. He used to be unpredictable and hard to read. Now, he was like a loyal puppy, always around me. His constant presence felt suffocating. One evening after work, I couldn't hold back anymore. Caleb, we need to talk. Lately, he left work earlier than me and took on the responsibility of preparing dinner. Everything at home was neatly organized. On the surface, everything seemed normal. It seemed like life was getting back on track. This was the life and the Caleb I had once longed for. But now, I felt an inexplicable resistance. Our relationship had already soured. Seeing my serious expression, Caleb instinctively avoided my gaze. The chicken wings you like are almost ready. He knew what I wanted to say but chose to avoid it. Avoiding won't solve anything, I said. What's wrong? Don't you like the food? What do you want tomorrow, spicy hot pot? Or grilled chicken wings? I've learned several new dishes. He rambled, trying to change the subject. Caleb, I have to leave for a business trip tomorrow. Can we talk when I get back? His eyes were red, his voice pleading. I thought this would make me waver. But it only made me more frustrated. Weakness is for those who truly love each other. For me now, there was no such feeling for Caleb. In the end, I agreed to wait until he returned from his trip. I had an important business meeting to prepare for. Dinner was unusually silent. In the past, I would keep the conversation going, but it gradually became Caleb sharing his day. Tonight, we both stayed silent. After dinner, I grabbed my laptop to work in my room. Passing by Caleb, I casually reminded him, "Rest early, you have a trip tomorrow." His eyes lit up, maybe expecting me to help him pack as usual. But I didn't. I left him with the sound of a closing door. Chapter 8. The next morning, Caleb had already left with his suitcase when I woke up. I felt a strange sense of relief. Without Caleb around, I felt much better. The meeting went well, and I secured 3 new contracts for the company. My recent performance had caught the attention of the higher-ups. The company planned to open a branch in a nearby city and unanimously agreed to send me to manage it. Hearing this, I was thrilled and immediately called my parents. They were happy for me but also worried. Moving to another city would mean a long-distance relationship with Caleb. "Olivia, can you bear to be apart from him?" They knew how attached I was to Caleb. They didn't think I would choose my career over him. "Dad, Mom, we broke up." They were silent for a moment. Then my mom said, "Sweetie, we'll support whatever decision you make." "That's right. If you want to move, we'll sell our house and buy one there, so it's convenient for work." My dad chimed in. My parents always had my best interests at heart. "Thank you." Tears welled up as I spoke. "Silly girl, no need to thank us." They didn't ask about Caleb, only about the move. That night, my dad suggested a celebratory dinner for my promotion. I wanted to take them to an old restaurant. But my dad insisted on trying a trendy new place. "Today is for celebrating you, pick wherever you like." Hearing this, I teared up again. With Caleb, we always ate where he liked. He preferred bland food, so we often had local snacks. That night, we went to a Chongqing hot pot place I had always wanted to try. My parents didn't like spicy food, but they ordered a dual flavor pot for me and even tried some of the spicy side. "Dad, Mom, you don't have to force yourselves. The tomato broth is good too. Let's start with the spicy side. May our daughter's future be as prosperous as this hot pot." We clinked our soda glasses. Through the steam, I saw my parents' graying hair. I had neglected them for Caleb. "I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you." Watching them enjoy the food, I couldn't help but smile. Tears filled my eyes again. After dinner, as we were leaving, I saw 2 unwelcome figures. "Sister, you're here too?" Zoe's fake greeting reached my ears. I glanced over and saw Caleb, just back from his trip, with her. Seeing me, Caleb hurried over, trying to shake her off. "Olivia, listen to me." Caleb tried to make excuses, but I didn't want to hear it. "Sorry, we have to go. Enjoy your meal." I pulled my parents away. "Wait." Caleb tried to stop me. "Don't touch my daughter." My dad's voice was stern. "You have no right. Stay away from her, or you'll regret it." Hearing my dad's words, Caleb looked shocked. He desperately looked to me for help. Explained to my parents, "It's just a misunderstanding, we're not really over." "Caleb, we're done." My words froze the air. His actions had already left a bad impression, even if I hadn't immediately ended things. But now, saying it out loud shattered his defenses. Chapter 9. Caleb wanted to grab my hand but didn't dare with my dad there. He could only watch me leave. I heard him yelling at Zoe behind me. "Get lost, get out of here." I took my parents home. They offered to let me stay the night, but I declined. I had things to settle. Breaking up should be done face to face, to give our 8 years a proper end. Back home, Caleb rushed to grab my arm, apologizing nonstop. "Olivia, I know I was wrong, please forgive me." I pulled my arm away and sat in the living room. "Caleb, we need to talk." He followed me, looking desperate. "Are you still mad about the birthday?" "I'm sorry, really. Don't say we're breaking up." We've been together for 8 years. I didn't want to hear his excuses and interrupted him. Caleb, I'm not reminiscing about the past. I was foolish. No. Olivia, forgive me. I'll change. I really was on a business trip, I didn't lie. Today, Zoe won 20 yuan on a scratch card, so we went for hot pot. Enough, Caleb, stop. I had no interest in his excuses. Caleb, let's break up. What did I do wrong? Tell me, I'll change. Was it the birthday, the class reunion, or something else? Just tell me I'll change, please. He was like the old me, losing control and desperate. I had become the old him, watching coldly, feeling annoyed. I took out a bag from the drawer. Inside were the pieces of the vase Caleb had smashed. I spread them on the coffee table. Caleb, you broke this. It can never be the same. Then I went to pack my things. I didn't have much, just one suitcase. When I came back, Caleb was trying to glue the vase back together. Olivia, give me time, I can fix it, trust me please. I looked at his futile efforts and left without looking back. Opening the door, I saw Zoe standing there. She looked pitiful. Sister, there's nothing between Cal and me. Don't fight because of me. I'm here to apologize, don't be mad. I wasn't in the mood to talk and interrupted her. I wish you both happiness and a baby soon. I pushed past her and left with my suitcase. Behind me, Zoe cried. Sister, why did you push me? Cal, why are you stepping over me? Cal, don't go. She clung to Caleb's leg, not letting him go. I got into my pre-booked car and left. Behind me, I heard Caleb's voice. Olivia, how can I live without you? Olivia, I can't live without you. The driver saw this in the rearview mirror and smiled. Young lady, are you really breaking up? I smiled without answering. Breaking up wasn't a whim. It was the result of countless sleepless nights. Now, I'm finally free. Everything will get better. No one can stop me from becoming a better person. The end.